Deion Sanders saying that he wants his starting quarterback to be from a two-parent household. Said, quote, "We want mother, father, dual parents. We want that kid to be 3.5 GPA and up because he's got to be smart." Well, you don't have to have two parents to be smart. But I do think there's probably a correlation between being well grounded and having two parents, not across the board. We're not talking about completely that every person from a single parent household is a mess and that every person from a dual household is perfect and fantastic. So let's go ahead and take the absolutes out of it. But what did you make of those comments? Deion can get away with saying things that a lot of other coaches can't. So if Nick Saban said this, I think it would be deemed as borderline racist. And I think that it would be deemed as very judgmental. Deion says it, and he says a lot, and he's African American. So I didn't think it got near the play that it would have with somebody else. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think I said this over the weekend. I think some coaches would not get away with it. I think I don't know if it's the race thing. I think it's more Deion has cachet, which Nick Saban has too. I think if Billy Napier says that, it looks bad. Put it that way. We all judge him on that.
Okay, let's take Billy Napier out of it, and let's go with somebody who's successful. But no, we're talking about with Nick Saban. That's an absolute. Okay, so let's talk about an extreme, I should say. Let's take. I don't know, who's a good coach but not a great coach that happens to be Lincoln Riley. If Lincoln Riley said this, how would it be taken?
Yeah, I think it would be taken negatively if Lincoln Riley said it. I don't think Lincoln Riley has built up the cachet at where he's at or as a national figure. I think if Ryan Day says it, he gets flack. But on the other side, I think if Mel Tucker says it, he gets flack, who's an African-American himself at Michigan State. I think it's Deion Sanders has a unique amount of cachet that I don't think he deserves yet.
For an unproven coach.
Coach.
I disagree. I think there's a race element in there. I think if Mel Tucker said it, he would get away with it. I don't believe in overplaying race because I think it just divides us as a country. But I believe in this particular case that even if it were Nick Saban, but especially a guy without that much cachet, I believe if it were a Caucasian coach that he would be more likely to be under the microscope. I'm stunned that this flew under the radar because this interview was done last week during the lead up to the Super Bowl. So when you sent this to me as an idea, I was like, wow, how did I not hear that? Because I particularly love listening to national shows leading up to the Super Bowl because you hear from all these different people. I'm stunned this didn't get more play. Stunned.
I think, and I will say this, and I would be consistent. I don't care if it's Deion or Nick Saban. I think it's an awful thing to say. And even if he may be speaking the truth, look, let's parse this out real quick. Obviously, two-parent households are ideal situations. You want to encourage that for all kids. And yes, there may be a correlation. But if kids from a two-parent, this fuels the point that America's not a meritocracy. If a kid from a single-parent household who is already at a disadvantage from a single-parent household, we want to tell kids all the time, overcome your obstacles and fight to make it, and you can make it. Well, now we're hearing the honest truth that even if they fight to make it, there are people like Deion Sanders who won't give them the opportunity they deserve specifically because they're not from a two-parent household. That's the grossest thing I've ever heard. Tennessee has this, by the way, he didn't just say it for quarterbacks. He said it for offensive linemen back in January.
And, I didn't know that. So again, that flew under the radar that I didn't know. Smoky Mountain Red said there are situations where a kid is way better off with one parent. Agreed. You also know that if Nico or Arch, I'm talking about Arch Manning, a caliber quarterback was in a single parent home and wanted to play for him, he would roll out the red carpet for them in a heartbeat. Totally agree with that. I would change this if I were him or any other coach. And I'd say, what do you look for? If somebody asked me this question, what do you look for in a quarterback? I would say this. I would say I look for a quarterback with a stable home environment. That could be, and I'm not going to go into depth or detail about this, but that could be one parent. And Smoky Mountains Red is absolutely right. Sometimes the parent's better off not being around. So I would say a stable home. And I know a lot of single parents or divorcees that have remarried that have provided stable homes. I'm sure there are a lot of situations where there's two women or two men that have kids, and that's a stable home. So that's how I would change that verbiage. And I think Deion likes to shoot from the hip, and that's probably what he did here.
Deion himself is divorced and is about to start his son, who was raised by him and his mother, who were divorced, to start at Colorado. It's ragingly hypocritical. And I'm just going to go to Tennessee real quick. See, I wouldn't even go stable home. I think we sit there. This is my point. We try to, one, it's a myth in my opinion, but we try to sell this idea in America that, if you work hard, your background doesn't matter, and it shouldn't matter, and you shouldn't use it as an excuse. Well, if people like Deion Sanders, and by the way, I think Deion Sanders is just saying what a lot of coaches are doing. I'm going to be honest. I think a lot of coaches are doing this. But if your background shouldn't matter as an excuse, well, then don't count it against you if you do everything right and you can't help your home life. And so I think something like, before we talked about the show ahead of time, T. Martin from Mobile, his father was in and out of his life. His mother cared for him, but his mother had to work a lot to raise him. So he was effectively raised by his grandmother and his great-grandmother. Well, he turned out to be a bright kid, very, very, very good player, made the most mature decision ever to go to Tennessee because he actually said at the time, he said, I knew I needed to learn more about playing quarterback in college before I could immediately start, and became one of the most successful quarterbacks in Tennessee football history. Deion brought up offensive lineman, Trey Smith. I think the most beloved Tennessee offensive lineman right now. His mother died of breast cancer when he was 13. Would Deion sit there and say, sorry, your mother died when you were 13. You can't come play offensive line for me? This is beyond disgusting, honestly, for me. And
well, I give you something that's even more disgusting. A defensive coach told me one time, he said the best linebackers were beating his children. So Don't think for a second that coaches aren't looking into the background. And that was something that was told to me by a defensive coach. And they have that rage, that anger in them. And maybe you want that more in a linebacker than you do a quarterback. I mean, the whole idea that is the end all be all either way, having two parents, and that determines who you are as an adult, is just false.
Correct. And here's what I want to say. And I want to say this to everybody. Everybody who says, I don't want to hear a word from anybody who says, well, if you grew up in a certain background, that's not an excuse and you don't deserve any assistance because if you work hard, you can make it on your own. Don't tell me that. And then at the same time, defend a system like what Deion Sanders is doing, where he says you're actually going to discriminate against people because of their background. You can't have it both ways on this. We live in an era where we literally do everything we can to say, let's ignore the needs of kids because if they work hard, they can make it on their own because that's America. And then we at the same time, we're going to embrace a coach like Deion Sanders, again, who's just saying what so many other coaches are doing and just not saying out loud, that no, they're actually discriminating against people with rough backgrounds because they think it does dictate who you are. So don't come and tell me then that anybody can overcome their background when people are being discriminated against because of their background.